All right, so let's talk about oil paint and just give you an overview of how to work with this material and also what makes it different from other paint mediums we've used in this class. So oil paint, just like any other paint, is a combination of the pigment itself and then a binder. So the binder in this case is linseed oil. And the advantage of oil paint is that it dries very slowly. We're talking it'll stay wet for a whole day, and it'll take, depending on the thickness of your paint, multiple days to truly dry. And so this just gives you a very different painting experience. The mediums that we're going to use to clean our brushes and to thin out our paint are toxic, and so it's really important that you keep them away from your skin. It's not like your skin is going to burn off or anything, but I do recommend you wear gloves because it's pretty hard to wash the paint off of your hands. And then, so the liquid that we're going to be using to thin out our paint is called a solvent. And then a medium, which is something that will change the consistency of the paint, is just called a medium. Right. So the solvent we're going to be using is terpenoid here, and then our mediums here, like I said, they adapt the consistency. You can buy mediums to extend the dry time. You can buy mediums to shorten the dry time, and those are just mixed in directly with the paint. We won't be using too much of those, but I just want you to know for the future. The solvent, what we're going to be using to clean our brushes or to thin out the paint, is going to be put in these little jars. Make sure that your solvent isn't super dirty, and we can talk about how to minimize that. But if it is, please let me know so I can change it out for you. We are going to be using palette knives to mix our paint. I would say that with other materials, it is, for acrylic paint, for example, I certainly encourage a palette knife, but it's not necessary. I would say in oil paint, using a palette knife to mix is necessary. No ifs, ands, or buts. Do not use your brush. And then we have a wide variety of brushes here. We're mostly going to be working with flat brushes. I find that those are the most versatile, but I just want you to know that there are other types of brushes that oil painters use. Because you are only the few that are going to be working with oil paint, please make sure that your brushes are cleaned really well and that they are kept completely separate from all acrylic painting materials. Oil and water don't mix, and so an acrylic brush cannot be used for oil paint and vice versa. Please wipe your knives. Once the paint dries on the knife, it's really hard to take it off. Please make sure that the paint tubes and the jars are put away and that your palettes are stored. Okay, so when we are cleaning our oil paint brushes, it's really important that you wipe all the excess paint off on a paper towel or a rag first before you dip it into your terpenoid or in your solvent to clean your brush. And this is how we can minimize that solvent becoming really dirty. If you just put in your brush that has a bunch of paint into the jar, all of that paint is going to get into your solvent. But if you wipe your brush clean first, or mostly clean, then you're just basically rinsing off very little paint on your brush, okay? Only after you have completely cleaned your brush using solvent, you could use soap and warm water just to sort of condition the bristles and just to get off any extra gunk. But again, oil and water don't mix, so you don't want to rely on water and soap to clean your brushes. It will not clean. Because oil paint takes a long time to dry, it's easy for your colors to become muddied or to become grayed, kind of gray and like brown and all smushed together. So it's really important, I would say, much more than with acrylic and with watercolor paint, that you know where your paint is going, because you don't have tons of chances to just go over and over and over in the same session. That's when your colors become muddied. So just the way that we approached acrylic painting, whenever you are painting your subject, make sure that you are looking for your light, your midtones, your darks, your reflected light, and that you are mixing all of those colors ahead of time on your palette before you start painting. Again, the advantage of oil paint is that it dries slow. So if you mix all those colors, they're not going to dry quickly. You have some time, unlike acrylic paint where you're kind of on a time crunch. So these two images just kind of illustrate that, right? If you're looking at this, you're trying to always look for those shapes, because ultimately that's what painting is, just blocking down different swatches of color next to one another to create the form. Something else I want you to keep in mind there are hard edges and soft edges and lost edges. And what that means is, for hard edges, you can see the seam where the two colors or the two values meet. And for soft edges, you have the hard edges, but then you take a brush and you go over that seam to make it soft. And then a lost edge is where we can hardly see the seam at all, that it's really almost completely fuzzy. And I would argue that the best oil painting has a combination of all three of these edges, that there are some areas that you want it to be super sharp and crispy, and there are other areas where you want it to be really soft and sort of like yummy and velvety. Okay, so this is going to be your process. For oil painting, you are going to sketch using one color and using your brush dipped in with a little bit of your Turpenoid to make kind of a soupy mixture, and you're going to draw out your form. Then you are going to identify what your major values are. They're usually going to be 4 or 5, right? And then you are going to paint either using a palette knife or your brush, but regardless, you need to mix all of those values first. So mix your values, mix your colors. Please trust me on this. Do not mix as you go. Try to mix everything in the beginning, and then you're going to apply and smooth out your paint. I am a big palette knife believer. I love to paint with my palette knife, but I know that that's not everyone's cup of tea. But make sure you are mixing enough piles and that you are picking up enough paint. Just choose one shape, choose one color and white, and practice just doing very simple forms. We've done this in Art 1, we've done this in Art 2, and the purpose of this is that I want you to get a feel for how the paint works, what it feels like on the brush, how to mix the colors using the palette knife, just all things that maybe we haven't done in a while or you're completely unfamiliar with. So just do a small one. I will give you a piece of canvas paper to work on. You're going to choose one. You're going to divide your canvas paper in half, paint it using the full 1/2, following those steps, and then we will move on to using color, and we'll talk a little bit about color.